To all those that are here present today, thank you for taking time to be here. And for those that are maybe have the opportunity to view this at a later time, thank you for taking time to view this, and I hope it will help provide some guidance on where we are with the COVID mandate for vaccination, and to help maybe answer some questions that will give you an opportunity to make an informed decision. As always, I'd like to take just a few moments here to thank all of our soldiers, all our airmen, and all of our employees that support the Military Department of South Carolina for what you do each and every day, and to also extend a thanks to your families. The business that we're in is serious business. It's been trying since 9/11, and certainly over the last couple years made even more challenging with the COVID pandemic that we have faced as a state, a nation, and as a world, and then the challenges that have been posed by way of the COVID vaccine mandate. But just always again want to tell you thank you. Your service, your sacrifice are appreciated and are needed. Had an opportunity this past week to attend the Green Tab Commanders Conference out at Peck Professional Education Center there in Little Rock, Arkansas. Had a chance to hear from Chief National Guard Bureau General Hokanson. Had a chance to hear from the FORCECOM Commander General Garrett, and then the Army Chief of Staff General McCarty. And they talked about a number of issues, but you can certainly probably understand where the focus of their primary comments were, and that is the current situation in Europe today. And I say that to use it as a stepping stone for part of why we're here and part of why we're going through the process to get the force vaccinated. For most of us that grew up, and not many of you have been around as long as I have, but in my early formative years as a lieutenant on active duty and as I transitioned to the Guard, my world was centered around NATO forces versus Warsaw Pact forces, and I probably knew the Fulda Gap as well as I knew my own backyard, at least from a map perspective. At that point, I never set foot on it, but we trained against scenarios all the time, facing what we thought would be a numerically superior force, both in personnel and in tanks, in infantry fighting vehicles, BMPs. We knew we were going to be outgunned, but we knew that we had an advantage over our foes there, not simply just in technology, but more importantly to the soldiers, the sailors, airmen, and Marines that serve this great nation. Their resiliency, their ability to be flexible, adaptive, has been an envy of the world for years. And I'm not a real deep student of history, but I do appreciate history and some of the readings that I had from World War II, how German senior officials were amazed at the adaptability of the American fighting soldier on the battlefield, of being able to transition from being a cook to an infantryman to being a tanker, could drive the equipment, could operate, could fix the equipment, and then contrary to that was the alignment that they have in terms of their command and control and what you were trained to do, and it was difficult for them to deviate from that. We saw again some of that same contrast during the Cold War. Again, reading some things from our Soviet comrades, I guess not comrades, but our potential adversaries, they were structured a lot in the same way. The last 20 years, obviously our focus has been on the coin fight, the global war on terror, but our adversaries, our peer and near peer adversaries, have been working hard to correct some of their deficiencies, both in technology. They feel some very advanced fighter aircraft, attack helicopters, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and to some degree they've tried to go back and learn from their mistakes by looking at the successes of the American military on the battlefield. And again, I think that's a tribute to the servicemen and women that put on the uniform and that are asked to do and then do the job that they do. And I don't want to ever overlook the contributions, again, that you make in those regards. So that puts us somewhat to where we are today. I think everyone is following with great interest what is going on in Europe, and we have been now for quite a while, and many, to include myself, just really did not believe that the Russians under Vladimir Putin would take aggressive actions. I was monitoring and saw what he had, but I thought all along he was just posturing to cut a deal that he could go back to Moscow, beat his chest and say, look what we were able to do by being a strong and aggressive military. Well, that didn't come to bear, and obviously today they're deeply engaged in fighting the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians are putting what I would call a very admirable effort to fight back, a spirit of what I see in our force, using all available means to defend their homeland and defend their fellow Ukrainian brothers and sisters. And with that, the points that General Garrett made, General Hokanson made, and General McConville is we always have to be focused on readiness, but there are obviously times that readiness is more important and more critical than others. And we're at that time now that our focus needs to be on making sure we are ready for whatever may come and be asked of us to do as servicemen and women, regardless of branch, regardless of component. And to that, I have asked our leadership, and I talked with the brigade commanders yesterday, let's get back to focused readiness at the soldier level, airman level, squad, and platoon. General McConville and others have said repeatedly, if our soldiers are competent, capable, and deployable at those levels, they can build the mechanisms around us, a CTC rotation at Fort Irwin or a JRTC or whatever, and get us ready to execute mission. And it's never been a doubt that our soldiers won't and our airmen won't perform at their level. Our tankers shoot well, our artillerymen shoot well, but it is other skill sets that we've got to begin to focus on that go above that, and we'll address that later. But the core thing that is important to us is readiness at the soldier, individual soldier, and airman level. And that readiness is spelled out each and every year in requirements that we go through. We spend a lot of time and effort during the IMRX process, which is going on just on the other side of the building. And we go through those things that we're asked to. And quite frankly, folks, it has been a good thing for a lot of our soldiers and airmen to have periodic physicals to give them an assessment of their health, because they may not be doing this in their civilian life. So it is a plus factor. But in the end, it's all about us building readiness. And with the COVID pandemic, we all went through that part, wearing masks, socially separation, which we still apply today as we can in certain situations. But we were waiting for an opportunity to move beyond that. And that opportunity came when the first vaccines were developed. And then the first vaccines were developed with an approval process for us to begin taking them. And to that point, we are right in the heart of that period of time in which Compo 2 and Compo 3 are working to get their force vaccinated. The Guard, both on the Army and Air, were a little bit different from the active component, and even within the structure of the Guard, there was a difference between the Air and the Army Guard. The Air Guard started roughly on the same timeline that we did, but they were much more accelerated and were, in essence, complete with a certain portion of the requirement in December. And I've been asked why there was differences in the two, and the only thing, because nothing was ever specifically said, but logically I would conclude that the Air Guard is a different organization in many respects than the Army Guard. Much of the Air Guard is like our Air Guard here, with the fighter wing is centric located here at McIntyre, fairly large facility, 2,400 acres, but you have all your airmen at one location on a predictable basis. Also, the Air Guard here in the Air Guard mission is a little different. They are sitting over there on the ramp now, ready for action, and they have a higher level of readiness. But the Army Guard, on the other side of that, we are a community-based organization. We have armories in 41 of the 46 counties. We have soldiers throughout the state, as does the Air Guard, but we go to many different locations, and it just made, I think, operationally better sense to try to spread that out. And even if we had compacted the timeline, I don't know that we would have had the resources to have administered in that same window anyway. But all that said, I just want to say that we are working to meet that guideline or that directive now that the SecDef has sent. And I will just cover a few things here, and then we'll go into a little more formalized question and answer or open it up. I do know that many of our servicemen and women are aware of a memo that the governor recently sent back in February the 17th, to the Secretary of Defense, outlining his concern about the vaccine mandate. I have been in contact with the governor's office. I have met with his chief of staff and other senior officials to discuss that. I've had consultation with our JAGs on that, and it is my intent to follow the guidelines set forth in the governor's memorandum. I also am aware and am, I believe, understand the guidelines set forth by the SecDef and by the service secretaries, both in the Army and the Air, of what the requirement are for vaccination. I intend to follow the intent of my Commander-in-Chief on the state side, the Governor of the state of South Carolina, and the Commander-in-Chief by way of the SecDef on the federal side of the House. So unless the SecDef sends some differing guidelines, it is my intent to follow that guideline within the constraints and within the left and rights given forth by the governor's memorandum, and that we will comply with the requirement along the timeline set forth by the Secretary of Defense and follow through on all of the guidelines that have come forth with that requirement. If there is a change in that guidance by the SecDef or possibly through the courts, then I will do what I believe is legally what I would be obligated to do. So at this point, it is my intent to continue along the guidelines of the COVID vaccination plan that we have in place, and I will continually update my boss, and really, folks, my boss is everyone in this room, because you're citizens of the great state of South Carolina. It is members of the General Assembly, it is the governor, and it is your family. So I owe it to them to be as open and transparent as I can be in what I believe my guidance is in terms of it complying with the SecDef's guidance and how I intend to accomplish that, with keeping in mind that I will try to be as fair and understanding to every soldier and airman that is in this situation that we're in at this point. And I will try to ensure that everything that we're supposed to do as an organization that we're going to do. When it comes to the vaccine itself, obviously it is a requirement to take the vaccine, but I realize it is also comes down to a personal choice. I cannot make you take the vaccine. What I will do is ensure that we have both medically personnel that can discuss the medical side of it. I will have, as we have here today, a panel of experts, and was not the intent to try to overwhelm the audience with a number of 06s and chaplains and JAGs up here with me. But what I wanted to have was an opportunity to answer any questions that you may have here today, and without having to defer that to, we'll get back with you later. Now, there could be a reason that we have to do that, but I wanted to have the people here today that I believe have a very good understanding, both administratively, medically, legally, and from a religious perspective and an operational perspective, those people here. But I cannot and make you take the vaccine, but I want to make sure that you have the information that you need to make a informed decision on. And like anything else, sometimes information is not always put out in an accurate way. And I'm not a subscriber to the social media side of the house, but I have had many people to come and say, "Sir, are you aware of this?" And I will read stuff and I'll say, "That's not correct." But in the eyes of who is reading it and in the context of the time and space that they are reading it, until proven differently, it may be correct, at least in their eyes. So it's my intent to ensure that we put out accurate information, that we answer your questions and do so in a timely manner. And on the glide path that we're currently on, and with again out deviations from the SecDef, come July the 1st, which is about 2.5 months from now, if you have not been vaccinated, if you have not received an approved exemption, medically or a religious exemption, you will not be able to drill or to attend AT with your unit. Therefore, you will not be in a paid status. Now, it is not my intent to have any soldiers or airmen to fall in that situation, but that could very well be the case come July 1. As with other decisions that we make in life, I again ask you to make an informed decision. You make a decision that you believe is in your best interest. It is in the best interest of your family, and which in that context is really what is the best interest of you as a whole going forward. I will respect your decision. If I have an opportunity to thank you for your service, to shake your hand, I will do so. Because all of us have given a lot to this great country. And for many of you, that has been a number of years under some very trying and difficult circumstances. But it is my intent, again, to follow the order that I believe to be a legal order, and we will do so unless there is change in that. As I look at this, it is not a situation that I have control over, and I'm not using that as an excuse. I cannot excuse someone after 1 July to be considered to be absent from drill with an excuse. I don't have that authority. So I just want to make sure that as we move forward, everyone understands what the circumstances and the situations will be at that time. And as a result of that, that's why I am going to ask again, and I met yesterday by phone with all the MSC commanders, and we have done this on a number of occasions, double down on ensuring that our soldiers are aware of the exemption process. Technically, all requests for exemptions were due by 1 March. So we have already passed that. Within the authority I have, I will accept if, as a commander at company level, battalion level, brigade level, if you can tell me that the soldier had done what the soldier was supposed to do and either didn't know for whatever reason that they had to meet that deadline, I will work with them on getting that packet put together and submitted up. But we have to have those packets to NGB by April the 4th. And I will do my part in ensuring those packets are at NGB. Many of them have already reached my level now. I have met with Captain Zorkowski with our G1 section. I will read every soldier's letter outlining their request for an exemption on the religious moral side. It's a little bit different on the medical side. I will read those, and I will read what is in there from their commanders, from the chaplain, and from the JAG. None of them, to include myself, have the authority to deny that request for a religious or moral exemption. Those all will go forth with either you concur with the recommendation or you don't, and then it will be forwarded up for a final decision. But we will get those packets completed and sent forth and will meet that April 4th deadline. Now, this is what I need from our command structure and really down to our soldiers. I need you to take an active role in helping get those packets ready. And again, if we've missed that 1 March deadline, we need to move quickly. And I cannot guarantee you that when it gets to the higher headquarters, that they see that it was initiated after 1 March, that it will be processed. But I will put, if necessary, a letter to it as to why it did not meet that 1 March. That again, I will need your help as a commander in helping me formulate why we could not meet that initial 1 March deadline. So as we are here today and we move into next week, every day now is critical. We need to get these exemptions in the works, and we need to get them through the channels so that the chaplains can make their review, the JAGs can make their review, I can get them and fulfill my responsibilities in doing those and ensuring that we meet that 4 April deadline. I have received a few, I would say, not complaints, but just been informed by both soldiers and people representing soldiers that there is some misinformation getting out, and that some of our soldiers and airmen may not be treated with what I would expect for all of our soldiers, airmen, and employees to be treated with, and that is dignity and respect. Folks, this is not a personal matter. This is a professional matter. I intend for everyone that's a part of the leadership in this organization to be professional in how they conduct their business. And if a soldier or an airman is choosing to submit an exemption or even has chosen to not take the vaccine, I still expect them to be treated with dignity and respect and professionalism. And if I find where that is not happening, I will deal with it. But I expect people to be treated with respect. We do that in every other category of business that we have each and every day. This is to be considered no exception. It is a matter of business. There's a process. We will stay with that process. And in everything that we do, we may not always agree with things, but we can certainly in this case understand what the process is and work to do it within that framework. Again, ultimately, this is a matter that will come down to you making a choice. And in the end, as we all know, with choices, there can be and will be consequences. It's not a threat on my part to anyone here. It's simply I want to make sure everyone understands. I intend to do what I believe my job is. I expect those that work for me and work in this organization to do their job. And part of that is ensuring that our soldiers, our airmen, know what the requirements are and they are given full opportunity to educate themselves in making their decision. Ask the leadership that was at PEC, as did other tags, did we anticipate any changes coming that would impact the current guidelines, both either in the timeline or in the implementation process? And the resounding answer was no. And it's based on, obviously, folks, what is believed a very important part of our readiness. Is it complicated or in some way being defined about what's going on today in the world? Probably so. The active component has moved pretty much through this process and are now, as you know, are focusing on the potential situation that could come at some point in time in Europe. We've got to do the same thing. I want to move the process along, and there was a question that was posed early on about the deadline set forth by the Army of June 30th. I chose to put a suspense date of April the 30th, and I will explain that, and as simply as this. I have never had a suspense date from my higher headquarters that I didn't back off some time to ensure I could complete the task and meet the suspense of my higher headquarters. So in great part, that was the justification of the 30 April suspense date and deadline that I put in. But I do own that piece of time between 30 April and 30 June, giving me an opportunity, if there are mitigating issues, circumstances, that I have an opportunity to work and maybe in those one-on-one narrowly defined areas. But it still is my intent to meet that 30 April deadline so that we can begin to look at our formations and understand what those formations are going to look like sometime 30 June or beyond. We will have this year overlapping into next year over 1,700 soldiers that are going to be deployed. We just received 2 other potential NASAs, and they will, I think one has already been received officially. The other we're expecting here shortly. So we're constantly in a respond mode to mission sets that have affected this organization now for 20 years. We have in the past, we will today, and it's my intent tomorrow, be an organization that is able to meet those requirements, to do so with the soldiers and the airmen and with the leadership necessary to accomplish the mission. And we will always look to do everything we can to set a unit up for success. Recently had a chance to see the soldiers of the 133rd MP Company, both as they got on the plane here in Columbia and as they were getting ready to deploy from Fort Bliss overseas. And folks, it reminded me again of the tremendous sacrifice that all of our servicemen and women make in wearing the cloth of this country. Had an opportunity today as we were going down for a promotion ceremony, and I was reflecting with a friend where I have been, where we have been, and how I have, I think, in some of my thoughts matured a little bit along the way. It was always business to me, and it is still business, and I always recognize the sacrifice. But as you get older and you see your kids grow up, you see grandkids come along, and you begin to realize when you put a soldier on a plane and send them away for a year, it gets you. It does. And I do take it seriously. And to those soldiers that were on the plane that day, and I looked them in the eye, and I thanked them for what they did, and I thanked them for having met all the requirements for readiness as prescribed by the mobilization, I was again reminded of the seriousness of our business and what it takes to do our job. Likewise, when the 108th Chem just recently deployed, and as I said, we will have many more to do so. So I take the business and the responsibilities I have as Adjutant General seriously, and I want to ensure that this organization is ready at all times to answer its mission And part of this right now goes to the COVID vaccine issue. And again, I will do everything I can to take care of the soldier, take care of the airmen in any respect of how they choose to go about this. But it is my intent to fulfill what I believe is a lawful order, and I will do so until directed to do something different. Turn it back to you, Captain Nunley.
Thank you, sir. I will now present the questions we received from the field for the panel and General McCarty to answer. This first question was addressed in your comments, sir, but if we'd like to reemphasize the answer. The question is, why aren't soldiers still allowed to submit an exemption request at this time?
All right. Hey, Colonel Heaton, the G1, the Adjutant General just described the conditions by which we would accept a packet, dismiss the suspense, and a few things I'd like to add. It's really important that we make sure the packet is complete, that it's accurate, administratively complete, and has the appropriate content. Those suspensions, particularly one of 4 April, the intent is that we have a decision for that packet by the ultimate suspense of 30 June. So again, the Adjutant General laid out the conditions by which we would take them. We just ask that you get the packets administratively correct and through your chain of command to the G1 shop as quickly as possible. We're simply running out of time.
And the second question is, can a soldier request a medical exemption through a civilian provider?
Good afternoon, Colonel Batten, Deputy State Surgeon. The medical exemption process does not allow a civilian provider to say that you are exempt from taking the COVID vaccine as required by the immunization regulations. You do, however, need to get your documents from the civilian medical provider, submit them to the Office of the State Surgeon so that we can submit them up through the appropriate channels to have them reviewed through the military channels for your medical exemption waiver to be processed.
Thank you, ma'am. The third question is, if a soldier submitted a religious accommodation packet, how can they know where that packet currently is in the process?
There's a couple of ways. The first is I would recommend the soldier ask their frontline leader or their unit administrator or readiness NCO. There's also a way that an individual soldier can look in our personnel system called IPSA under self-service and see the status of any request that's been made on their behalf. And we can put out some detailed instructions on how to do that. But the first place I would start is with the unit administrator or frontline leader.
And the next question is the same question for the medical exemption packet. How can a soldier know where that packet is in the process?
Absolutely. Your first point of contact is always your battalion medical readiness NCO or your brigade medical readiness NCO, and they will contact us at the Office of the State Surgeon to inquire about the location of your packet. That is tracked. We can look it up at any time to see where it's processed. I will tell you that everything that has been submitted to our office to date has been submitted. We've submitted 33 packets.
Thank you, ma'am. And sir, this question was also addressed in your comments, but if we would like to highlight the answer again, is why is the timeline for the South Carolina Army National Guard to receive the shot different than the timeline provided by the U.S. Army for the Army National Guard of June 30th?
And again, I just wanted to build in some flexibility. I wanted to build in a window of opportunity to ensure that we met the suspense date back to NGB and up through channels of what that 30 June date was. I wanted to have the opportunity to ensure that our packets were met the standard. There has been an issue on the Air Guard side, not just to our Air Guard, but the Air Guard as a whole. So having a window to ensure that we got the packets right, that we didn't further delay the process, was part of that decision-making, part of my decision-making process. And then again, I own that period of time between 30 April and 30 June. And if we have particular situations that could not be resolved prior to that, I have the flexibility to work within that window, and I would intend to use all the tools that I have to allow a soldier to make the right decision and to give them the best opportunity to ensure what their desires are are met by ensuring that the packets are right and that we ultimately meet that deadline set forth by hire. So.
Sir. The next question is, what is the estimated timeline for an exemption request to go through the entire approval process?
Okay, just to give you a little bit of scope here, roughly 400 packets are currently in the process. About a third are at the brigade and battalion level, about a third are being processed, and about a third are nearly complete. It's taken about 60 days to get those from the soldier through the unit, through the chaplain and the JAG to the adjutant general for signature. We do not know the timeline it will take once it leaves the state and goes to NGB. I do want to remind you again that the 1 April, the 4 April suspense is to provide enough time for that packet to make it through the approval levels at NGB and higher prior to the 3rd of June suspense.
Thank you, sir. And the final question we have is, will a soldier be able to attend professional military education while in the exemption request process?
Good afternoon, Colonel Bullwinkle, the G3. Effective 21 January, in accordance of 22, effective 21 January of 2022, in accordance with Department of Defense guidance and Army National Guard, military travel and school attendance is only authorized for fully vaccinated personnel.
Thank you, sir. Major General McCarty and the panel will now accept questions from the audience. If you do have a question, please make your way to either side of the auditorium and form a line so that you will be able to use the microphones and address the panel. If you do have a question, please remember your military bearing and remain professional.
Good afternoon, Major General McCarty, General Jones, member of the panel. My name is Sergeant First Class Christopher Major. I'm a Readiness NCO at Alpha Company 151 Signal in Greenwood, South Carolina. Sir, I have a packet in myself, but I'm also here to represent the soldiers of Alpha Company 151 and the remaining soldiers of South Carolina Army National Guards who may have a packet in. My question for the panel today, sir, among many questions I may have, has behavioral health issues been considered when it comes to submitting these packages and receiving the results? Thank you, sir.
All right. I don't know that I can answer that question here today.
So just to make sure I understand your question, are you asking if behavioral health is a diagnosis to submit a medical exemption waiver? Is that what you're asking?
Well, ma'am, that's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, as a Readiness NCO and my personal self, I've lost sleep over these issues. And I've received packets from soldiers who are also losing sleep. So have we considered the future BH issues that we may be receiving from these packets being submitted and the future for these guardsmen?
Well, so I know that we are concerned always, every day, with the behavioral health, the physical health of our soldiers, for whatever reason. So, again, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking, but I'll tell you, I know that our chain of command cares about our soldiers, and I know that we have resources available to help our soldiers. And so whether your soldiers are losing sleep over maybe having to contemplate about taking this vaccine or losing sleep over another issue in their life, as leaders, we make sure, General McCarty has made sure that there are the resources there to help their soldiers, whatever the stressor is.
Okay. And I appreciate the clarification, because my first thought when you asked the question was, from the medical side, was there a part of it? And I don't know that side, but I do now, I think, understand your question better. And Colonel Batten, I think, gave you the answer that I would. That certainly we are concerned about all aspects of that that impact our soldiers, airmen, and their families in any way, to include deployments and to include separation that comes from everything that we do from a training standpoint and the requirements that we have given to them. We work hard to ensure that we have behavioral health personnel to help deal with those issues. We work close with deployed units and family members, and we will make those same services available to the soldiers that are affected in this process also. To ultimately, does it impact the decision? If that is your question, I cannot answer that here today if that is your question, but I can raise that up to see if that is in any way a consideration. But to those issues that may come from it, the resources that we have, we would certainly open those up to any of our soldiers and to their families, just as we would for other issues that impact our soldiers' behavioral health or other things that impact their ability to serve at the highest level that we need them to serve at in this organization.
Sir, that's some great answer, man. Good, thank you. And just to clarify on my part, that's kind of what I was alluding to, is the step forward after the decision is made, if we've considered the follow-up on that with these soldiers.
I would say that this process is really no different than anything else that we do. We are always learning as we go. What we accomplished over the last 20 years in the war fight was in great part by what we learned yesterday and what we did today to make tomorrow a better day for our soldiers. I would expect in this environment we will learn from what we had as an issue or concern yesterday and today to hopefully make tomorrow a better day. And I would again ask that the organization be as accommodating as it can be, and then those professionals that work for us each and every day in the behavioral health side of the house, if they're not already, I will get with them and just make sure that they are tracking that there could be an uptick in calls, an uptick in demand for services, and we will do what we can do to ensure that we have the resources to help in that arena.
And if I may, sir, the behavioral health assets, they are there for people once they're out of uniform as well. Just because you're in uniform today and may not be tomorrow does not mean that the faucet for those resources gets turned off. Our behavioral health, they meet with veterans that got out 10 years ago every single day. And so they are for the soldier for life, whether it's if you're serving now or if you had served in the past. They're there to continue to provide support at any point along your journey.
Sir, if I may, as a former director of the Service Member Family Care, where the behavioral health fell under, I would encourage you to engage now with that one-stop shop closest to you and your service members and get ahead of it. Don't wait for the decision to come back positive or negative. Engage them now. Get your help, get your soldiers help today.
And of course, there is a behavioral health officer, full-time director of psychological health, both Army and Air, that's available.
Could you provide his name, ma'am, for the audience?
Can I provide what?
That's that person's name, ma'am.
Right, Captain Henry for the Air. I know it for the Air. I don't know the director of psychological health for the Army. I mean, for the Air, I know for the Army, Captain Henry.
We'll get Gary.
We can get that information.
Rico?
Yeah, Lieutenant Rico Brown.
Okay.
I want to say this. I do appreciate you coming up and acknowledging what you just acknowledged. That is important. And I told the MFC commanders yesterday, and I tell them this time to time, if there's an issue that keeps them awake at night, then it probably is an issue that should keep me awake at night. And if this is affecting you, is it affecting our soldiers in a way, then it's going to concern me, because I don't live in a different world than you live in. We see and have similar challenges, maybe just from different perspectives. But I do appreciate you acknowledging it in the public forum, and we will do what we can to help you and any soldier who are facing those challenges. Uncertainty is difficult. We can deal with pretty much anything that we know as a reality, but uncertainty, even when we know where maybe that uncertainty is carrying us to, until you get there, it is tough to deal with. And I appreciate you being willing to say that. Thank you.
Do we have any others in the audience?
And if you're not speaking for yourself and want to speak for somebody else, I appreciate that and we'll accept that also.
Afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
I would like to say thank you for the panel. This is awesome to have the discussion, and I really sincerely appreciate that. For soldiers in my boat that have 20 years and are facing the decision of whether to retire based upon what the decision of the exemption request is, what does that look like? Do we have to go ahead and file to have it ready to retire 1 July, or do we wait until we get the decision back so as to not meet any punitive actions against us?
So in this scenario, the soldier has an exemption pending. And I'm assuming you're asking if it's disapproved, the soldier would then want to retire.
Correct.
So there's a couple of things, with the assumption being that these requests will be decided upon prior to 30 June. I can't make a recommendation for the soldier by the choice they make, but if a soldier wants to request an early retirement, that's not an unusual or uncommon request. The conditions may be slightly different. Does that help clarify at all?
Roger. That does. I guess the question I'm asking, I know I've talked to some other people as well, have no intentions of retiring if I get the exemption. If the exemption comes back denied, I would just like to retire immediately. Is that available, or am I going to be in a punitive situation if this packet doesn't come back until 2 July? What does that look like for me?
There's been no discussion of anything punitive. Everything thus far would be an administrative action to be determined, understanding that after 1 July, you could not perform any duty in a pay status or any duty at all.
So if it comes back July, denied, and I just come on down to the retirement with my letter?
That would be
we're
my
good to
recommendation. Under those facts and that scenario, yes.
All right, let me do this. Let us pose that question up and get what is an answer today. And I say that not being in any way avoiding of it or things can change. We have been waiting now for Phase 2 guidance to be issued out. When Phase 2 guidance is issued, it may clarify that type of question, but we can also front load what we anticipate. In this case, your question probably is a question that many will have. Certainly would not be my intent to have someone who goes through the process that's been asked of them, and if their exemption is denied, to then have a punitive action placed upon them. It would be my intent and my desire to allow you then to option the other option that you would have, and would be a retirement, whether it's the timing of your retirement that you would have wanted, but it should not be under any conditions different than your retirement would have been at any time. Let us pose that question and we'll get that answer back to ensure that everybody's tracking. Don't need any more surprises than what may already be there. Thank you, appreciate it, and thank you for your service.
I just wanted to add in, I double down on what the general said. Because in general, if the person has a flag on them when they're trying to retire, it creates an issue for them. So I know that's probably the thought process you're thinking about. And there's nothing out saying it's different than normal. So if someone had a flag for investigation or what have you, no one has talked about yet removing the flag and allowing you to retire. That may be part that we get, but we don't know right now. And I believe that what the general says, we're going to try to reach out and like an RFI, get some more information.
Just to clarify, a soldier's not flagged if they are purely requesting an exemption. Okay, so a flag may be applicable in some cases, but generally, if there's no other reason for an adverse action flag, an exemption request in and of it by itself does not result in a flag. Okay, just I want to make sure that it's clarified. Thank you.
Okay.
General McCarty.
Floor is yours again.
General McCarty, General Jones, members of the panel. I'm not on the drill status today, I'm AGR, obviously, I drove down. Is this gonna be the last town hall, for those who aren't drilling today? I know you did the broadcast for those who couldn't be here.
We will conduct those based upon what we think there's a need. I want to, again, be as open and transparent to our force as I can possibly be. I have committed to the governor, his staff, and members of the General Assembly that we will be engaging to our soldiers and airmen. This is another tool that we use. We send out through supplemental guidance. We send out through other mechanisms. If we believe there is a need for another town hall, I have no problem doing them. Whether or not I can have this forum of expertise at each one, but if I can't, I don't mind taking the questions, and if I can't answer it, I'll get back with you. But if we believe this is a valuable tool, and I'll even go as far as to say, if it will help soldiers make decisions that they are struggling with, I'm available whatever time. I'll come, I'll go out. I may be physically limited in getting every unit, but if you need me to come to talk with a group, I'll either go, General Jones, or we'll, that's part of my job. And it's my job to ensure readiness and ensure we're able to meet our missions. And if something of this nature that is as important as it is to readiness, then it's important to me. So yes, if we believe it's necessary.
Roger that, sir. The sensitivity of this issue and the seriousness of it, I think it is requested that you come out to the field, or General Jones come out to the field. I kind of paneled some of our soldiers who put in a request, so I did have some questions from them as well as myself, and I appreciate your time, sir. So my next question, sir, Major General McCarty, General Jones, members of the panel, you spoke earlier about authority, command authority. Command authority goes down to the lowest level, even to the NCOs. I can speak for my unit commander has, you know, in our conversations, we're facing a mobilization later this year. And so this could possibly take away from some of his strength in his unit. And he has made a comment, he would be willing to take that risk to deploy an unvaccinated soldier if possible. And so the command authority has seemed to stop with the Secretary of Defense, and I'm just wondering, is that true?
Well, you have to always put things into the perspective of what the question is. The SecDef is our civilian leadership, short of the president, to ensure that the defense of this nation is number one in his priority. He has service secretaries that implement and follow on with his guidance. Things that get at the heart of readiness are not going to be left in the hands of subordinate commanders, to include myself as the TAG or anyone else. Tactically, operationally, and in maybe select situations strategically, obviously command authority, command decision making to implement intent on the battlefield or implement intent in training is absolutely necessary. But the underlying principles as to how the force will be structured, what the requirements are for the force to be deployable, what the requirements are for us to be, it's not going to be, in this case, I applaud and appreciate the commander's perspective there, but looking at it in a bigger picture, where we are today, you may be able to argue that the current threat is not so great. But we have seen where it has been a tremendous taxing effect on our medical services. And in some states today, that's even the case. We employed significant restraint during a time to try to mandate or mitigate, the possibility of infection. Many states virtually drilled for successive months. We didn't do that because I don't think soldiering is a virtual skill. We worked to mitigate. I was down at Fort Stewart when the artillery battalion was down there doing artillery live fire. That is not a socially distancing activity. You're elbow to elbow. When they executed the mission, they came out and they spread out. In the end, we have to look at overarching larger issues. And the impact of a soldier getting sick with a medical issue that is known to be, in some cases, highly contagious. It may not affect them so much, but who they may transmit it to, it could be very serious. Does the vaccine give you 100% certainty of not? No, I can't sit here and say that. Does wearing a mask give you 100% certainty? We're taking best case information from the medical experts and trying to apply that to an operational issue of readiness. I applaud the commander and anyone, but at this point, that is not an option that we have to execute.
Sir, we have time for one more question if we could, but if you have additional questions, if you would like to write them down on the clipboard, it would help us prepare for that future event. So if you provide us those additional questions, we would make sure that we have the right people at that future event. So, but if we could open the floor for one last question.
Does anyone else have a question? Oh, okay, Avery.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
I'll make this quick. For those that are pending an exemption process and they come back with a disapproval, do you have a guideline for a time that they would have to become compliant after their disapproval?
We don't have that yet, clearly, unless you know of something that may come in phase 2 guidance, but
Sir, the 30 June suspense still applies.
So if their packet comes back disapproved, sir, on, let's just say 30 June, they're not given no time to make a decision, i.e. get the vaccine or request discharge?
Okay, so the 30 June suspense is a suspense where federal dollars cannot be paid for soldiers that are unvaccinated.
Yes.
That is not the same suspense. That's not a discharge date. That phase 2 guidance on how we would pursue a discharge, that has not been published yet. So in that scenario, the soldier could not drill, and during that time, they would have to make a decision: go get the vaccine, or don't go get the vaccine. The third option would be to request an appeal. So you get 30 days to request an appeal to the Assistant Secretary of the Army after, in that scenario, the disapproval came back. Does that clarify it all for you?
Somewhat, sir. I'm just concerned with the amount of packets going forward to be reviewed at the HQDA level and HB level. We're going to get a backlog. And if we get closer to that 30 June mark and the soldiers done everything they are required to do, it's just still sitting on somebody's desk because there's a pile of them, are they going to face that they can't get paid after 30 June? You just said, no, they can't. But they met their requirements. We have to meet our requirements to them as well.
Now, we believe if a packet moves from the state to NGB by 4 April, that we will get a decision back before 30 June.
Yes.
And we'll keep an eye on that. Once we get some packets moved through the entire process, we'll have a good benchmark on how long this takes.
And then we might have a timeline if it does come back. If it goes up 4 April and comes back 60 days later, that's 4 June roughly. How long of a time are we going to give them to get compliant is my main question.
I don't know that I can answer that question here today with a firm date. I believe, from what I understood last week, that there will be, once your exemption request is decided upon, and if it was denied, there will be one other opportunity for you to be vaccinated, but they did not put that in a timeline, a perspective. I would anticipate that probably being either a phase 2, part of the phase 2 guidance, or a supplemental guidance. But in the end, I don't think it's anyone's intent not to retain otherwise competent, capable, contributing soldiers to the force, airmen to the force. That would be counterintuitive to what we're all about. We're about recruiting and retaining the best we can. I will advocate to the degree I can that if a packet comes back that's not approved, but the soldier, ultimately says, I've got to make a decision now, and I would like to retain the ability to, remain in the service, I would advocate all I can for that. And I think that is the intent, but let me verify that and make sure we have that, an answer back to you as soon as we can.
Yes, sir, thank you.
And so that is the time that we have for today. Would you like to provide closing comments that we can coordinate for a future event for additional information and questions?
Thank you. And again, folks, I appreciate you coming out today, and I really appreciate those that step forward with a question, and I'm sure there are many other questions out there, and I will, as I said earlier, I'm committed to try to answer to you to the greatest degree I can what your concerns are, answer that back, so that bottom line you can make as an informed of a decision that could and will impact potentially your career and your livelihood and ability to support your family. I'll just stand again and say I am going to do what I believe my job is, but I will do so in a way that I will be as transparent and professional in that as I could possibly be. I will be as engaging as it is needed to be. And if you're, and this stands true all the time, my door stays open at the office 99% of the day. And it's open for a couple reasons. If you're up there and you want to stop by for any reason, stop by. Always like to chat with people. My wife would say I chat too much, but I like to chat with people. I like to know a little bit more about who you are, what makes you tick, because you are what this organization is. You represent our soldiers and our airmen and the people side of the equation. So it's always that I have an open door policy, as does General Jones and other leadership. And in a time like this, it's important that we do communicate openly and honestly with each other where we are, because it is important. The readiness of this country is always my concern. How we are in preparedness to readiness, whether it's for our federal mission or for our state mission. And you do a good job at ensuring that we answer the call. So thank you. May God bless each of you, this great state, this great nation, and I appreciate what you do. Thank you.